Good afternoon. South Africa is on the road to an election that will make or break the future, says some analysts and commentators. One wants to see elements of boisterousness and robustness, which is indeed present if you look deeply, but the scandals of corruption, state capture, and incapability associated with the current government are just too dark and negative and overwhelming a cloud to really feel the good energy associated with the aforementioned elements. So to try and make sense of what is happening, I have with me Mr. Tony Leon, the former leader of the DA. Good afternoon, Tony. Welcome to nuuspod.
Hello, goedemiddag, Izak. Baie dankie, thank you.
Tony, what do you expect from the ANC in the coming election?
I don't expect anything from the ANC in terms of, they'll say all the right things, they always do, and then we have another 5 years of disastrous misrule. I mean, I don't run the DA, but I mean, the 5 best run municipalities in South Africa by an objective metric announced the other day are all DA run. So if you want to live in a better governed place, you vote DA. If you want to live in a worse governed place, vote ANC. But the folks keep voting for the ANC, even in areas where their sewerage is running in the streets. So I don't think the ANC will be saying they'll make some announcements, they'll talk about better services. In reality, it'll get worse. But if you ask me what do I see in terms of results, I'm looking at the by-elections that were held last week and reading the excellent analyst Wayne Sussman, who really crunches the numbers in a very impressive way. He says the ANC is on course to a big victory and the DA is going to get a bloody nose. Now, look, a lot can happen between now and October. We don't even know if October is going to happen because some of those parties are very anxious that there not be elections, including the EFF, which doesn't seem to be able to win one of them. But yeah, on the current trends, I think the ANC is going to do well. I think the opposition will have a setback compared to 2016. But will it change anything? No. Because actually, one of the points that I make in this book is that it doesn't really matter who you vote for. It doesn't matter who gets what percentage, short of the ANC being voted out completely, because at the end of the day, the decisions are made by the ANC NEC. Whether the ANC gets 52% the vote or 62% vote doesn't really matter, because there are 107 odd people, some of them very odd, some of them criminals, as we know, sitting in the NEC of the ANC, and they are the deciders. It's like the scheme I used in my book, borrowed from Hannah Arendt, the famous German philosopher. She spoke about dual authority, where you have the idea or the pretense or the appearance of a constitution, which has a lot of impressive things in it, or laws. But the real authority is not in the Constitution. The real authority is not in Parliament, even though we pay our R500 million a year to our legislators to legislate. The real authority sits in a small little committee of 107 people in the ANC NEC, and they're a country of 58 million people. And how they vote or who they vote for is much less important than the decisions made out of sight, off the balance sheet, as we say, in accounts, by a cabal in the ANC, and they are the deciders, regardless of all the activity, noise, rallies that are held in the local elections. And that is very depressing, but I think it's also accurate. Now, it doesn't mean, of course, because they do have some powers, Cape Town is by any measure better administered than Johannesburg. And that's something to celebrate, but it's not saying that much.
But even then, the DA is battling to make grounds. Every time when you think they're going to make ground, they fall back. So let me ask you this. Do you agree with Sussman that the DA is going to get a blood nose?
Well, look, what he's done, and he does it very well, Wayne Sussman, he analyzed every single by-election. I'll just look at it, because it was published in the Business Day this morning. He analyzed every single by-election since 2016 in South Africa, and he says the DA has lost 29 of them, the ANC's lost 5. And what he's saying, if that trend continues, then bloedige is the uitslag. But look, the caveat here, and this is my view, and it's not just because I happen to be an old straighter or spondy DR. The caveat on Wayne Sussman, who's an excellent analyst, probably the best we have, is that it's the old dilemma. All our information comes from the past. Those are past by-elections up to last week. But all our decisions are about the future. So although the past doesn't go in a straight line into the future, I mean, a lot can happen between now and October when the election is. And I don't want to say inevitably the DA is on a sort of downward slide, because they have the ability still, they've got a lot of efficient people to change that narrative. But, it's late in the day and they need to get going. So, it's nothing is inevitable. But what Wayne has done in that is simply to look at the results to date.
Why do the DA manage to govern superbly wherever they are in control, but as a party they failed to, they're battling to get ahead and get places to govern? They govern well, but they have problems.
Ek dink dit is die $64 vraag daardie een. Hoekom doen hulle goed op grondvlak waar hulle regeer, maar hoekom doen hulle nie goed wanneer by die stembus kom nie, of in die afgelope paar maande? Ja, dit is baie moeilike, dit is baie interessante moeilike vraag. Ek dink die antwoord is soos volg. People in South Africa, and I'm generalizing here, do not go into the voting booth and to stem lokaal and say, ja, hierdie is goeie mense, ek stem vir hulle, ek stem teen daardie mense weens die feit dat hulle korrup of besig met bedrog is. I think, and it's not an original observation, this, and it's not confined to South Africa, I think a lot of people vote for parties because it's a measure of who they are. So you might call it's part of their identity. So it's not so much voting because, this one governs well and that one governs badly. It's because it's part of my identity. Now, we are still, I guess, a young democracy. I mean, South Africans in the old days when whites had the power here and they had voted for many years, also were involved in identity politics. As they used to say when I became an MP in 1989, what they used to do was you'd divide up the voters' roll into English and Afrikaans. And you'd assume that all Afrikaans-speaking people would vote either KP or NP, and the English would vote DP or UP or whatever it was. And the battle was for those few voters who were floating in the middle, who weren't aligned to either camp, as it were. And that was a way of predicting elections in South Africa, with a few exceptions. Of course, there were Blutz up on the Afrikaans side, and there were Engelsers who voted Nat increasingly as the years went by. But still, they were a minority on both sides. And that is because a lot of Afrikaans identity was tied up with the National Party, which had been, after all, a Volksbeweging Partij. And a lot of Engelsers were voted against the National Party precisely because they didn't think the National Party looked after their interests as English. So that was a lot of white politics. Now we have an all-race democracy. We had 26 years, and we expect it to somehow be different from that. That's perhaps pushing hope over experience. So I think a lot of folk in South Africa, Izak, vote not because, the Sunday Times front page shows you this wonderful picture of Mangaung. Where is it? Oh, no, this is somewhere else. Yes, Mangaung. This is Bloemfontein. This is what Bloemfontein looks like. It's lelik, dis 'n verras, dis skokkend. Model 'n stem ANC in daardie gebied. En jy moet jouself vra. It's like being an abused spouse. You keep going back to your husband, even though your husband beats you. Oh, why? I mean, it's very odd. But there's a psychology in that. And there seems to be a psychology in our voting that unless people feel that part of their identity is in the party they vote for, they're not going to vote for the party, however good that party is. Now, look, the DA has really been trying hard since I was the leader, and that you go back along. I left the leadership in 2007. I thought, well, let me get out before I get pushed. But, the party had gone from 7 seats to 15. We'd really tried to break through barriers. We'd broken through barriers among Afrikaners, overwhelmingly support us, Indians vote for us, coloureds vote for us, and a few Black South Africans, not that many. And I thought, well, let me get out of the way and they can then move forward. And they did for a while, and then they went backwards. But it's not going to happen immediately. It's time and experience. But, And maybe politics will have to be reformulated. So you can create a more open system where other people can help come to the fore. I don't know. It's not an easy question, but I think that's part of the answer.
I remember my first week at the SABC, it was in 2012, near the end of 2012. Helen Zille was visiting us in the newsroom, and it was an editorial meeting that she was talking to. And I remember her saying in that meeting that the DA plans for 32% of the total vote in future. I wanted to make a story of it, but my editor at that time said, "No, it won't be possible." But Helen was well on the way of doing that.
Helen was a very successful leader, and Musi for a while was, and then profoundly was not. So he had a mixed bag. But the thing is, you must not overestimate these things. It doesn't matter how you get your votes. I mean, provided you don't crook and cheat and kill people to get them. But I mean, a lot of the DA percentages became very good because ANC voters weren't going to vote and DA voters were going to vote en bloc, as you remember. So there was a stay away by the ANC under Zuma. And the big difference with Ramaphosa coming in was the ANC voters went back to vote. And in fact, Fikile Mbalula, who is the ANC election head, or was in the last election, said, if it weren't for Cyril, we'd be at 40%, not 57 or whatever they got. So I think that's right. So a lot of the DA's success wasn't just the DA doing well, it was the ANC doing badly. And the Zuma doing particularly badly. And so, yeah, they were getting close, but they made the wrong assumption that somehow it would just continue. And of course, there was a change in the union buildings very profoundly in 2018.
So maybe the DA must, or South Africans shouldn't be too hard on the DA. They have their problems, but maybe, as you say, there are other situations and circumstances that is out of your control.
Absolutely. Look, the DA does not make the political weather in South Africa. Izak, they make some of the weather and where they govern it in their own little corner. But, you know, I've said to John Steenhuisen and his fellow leaders, I said, look, it might be very unglamorous and unexciting if you've got only 20% of the vote. But, you know, if the ANC starts factionalizing and dividing and disappearing parts of it, your 20% could be very relevant. On itself, on its own, it doesn't sound like much, but 20%, if there's a fracturing in the majority party, is very important. It can be the decision makers between who lives and who dies in political power. So I said, you know, behold it. Obviously try and build in it, but also keep what you've got. That's my advice to them. It's not, of course, you know, this is a lot less exciting than measuring the curtains for the union buildings. I mean, need to point that out. But you never know. You can only control your own environment. You don't control the whole environment.